Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So here's another deck profile update today. This time it's on Counter Fairies. I know this has actually been requested quite a bit for the last few months, so I figured, you know what, now's a good time to go and update it now that I got everything that I need for it. So yeah, so let's go and get started. So for this deck, I decided to take things on a completely different direction. Counter Fairies is actually not a bad option. It does have some slight weaknesses considering that, you know, you are using counter traps and counter traps usually come with cost. But with cards like Pot of Extravagance and Pot of Duality, it should be relatively easy to get access to all your counter traps and all the cards that prevent you from paying any costs. So, yeah. All right, so starting off with 3 copies of Bountiful Artemis. Anytime a counter trap is activated and immediately after it resolves, you get to draw 1 card. And keep in mind, this is not once per turn. It's every time you activate a counter trap, so it really comes in handy. 3 copies of Guiding Arion. So this is what you do. You activate it on your pendulum scale. And the cool thing about this card is that it prevents you from paying any cost. You do not have to pay life points. You do not have to discard cards. And if it's destroyed by battle or card effect, and again, even if it's in the pendulum scale, as long as it's popped by a card effect, you can reveal 3 counter traps from your deck, and then your opponent chooses 1 for you to add to your hand. The rest go back to the deck. So it's basically pantheism. And again, none of the counter traps have to be a different name, so they could literally be the exact same counter trap. Next up, 2 copies of Minerva. So this is kind of like your true boss monster. Anytime you activate a counter trap and then after it resolves, she gains 500 attack points. And if Sanctuary in the Sky happens to be on the field, you can add 1 counter trap with a different name from your graveyard back to your hand. So it's a good way for recursion. 2 Barrier Statue of the Heavens. So this is a light attribute barrier statue. The whole point of this card is just to simply keep your opponent from special summoning anything except for light monsters. And right now, there's really not a lot of decks that use light monsters. Except dinosaurs, you know, with Tyranno. Tyranno is a light monster, but most of the time you'll be able to negate the summon anyway, so it almost doesn't even matter. 1 Meltiel. Anytime you activate a counter trap, you gain 1,000 light points, and if Sanctuary in the Sky is on the field, you get to destroy 1 card on your opponent's side of the field. And keep in mind, this does not target, so that's actually really good. Next, 1 Power Angel Valkyria. I was tempted to run 2, but I think 1 is more than enough. If you negate the activation of a spell, trap, or monster effect, you can add 1 light fairy from your deck to your hand. So it's a good way to also search out your important card pieces. And again, it's just as long as it's a light fairy monster, which comes to my next card that I like to add now is Archlord Christia. It is a fairy monster. It is a light attribute. As long as there's 4 fairy type monsters in your graveyard, you can special summon this card literally for free. And it has to be exactly 4 fairy monsters. And that's why the monster lineup's so small, because, you know, it's not hard to bring this card out whatsoever. But this is basically the Vanity's Fiend of this deck. Next up, 1 Sacred Arc Air Knight Parshath. I'm only running the 1. It's easy to bring this guy out. If you activate a counter trap and negate the activation of a spell, monster, or monster effect, you can banish 2 other fairy monsters. Bring this card from your hand, field, or graveyard. Not bring this out from your hand, field, or graveyard. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. You banish 2 fairy monsters from your hand, field, or graveyard to special summon this card. From your graveyard at least. Now, also you can bring this out by the effect of Rebirth of Parshath, if I'm not mistaken. So basically, when this card attacks an opponent's monster in defense mode, you still do piercing damage. And also you can add 1 Parshath card or counter trap from your deck to your hand. So it's a good way to also search out your cards. Next, 2 Honest, you know, just for a power boost. That's it. But it's easy to bring this out with Ties of the Brethren. You could just special summon this card and then add it back to your hand during your main phase. So it's really nice. All right, moving on. Next, we're going to be running the Sanctum of Parvati at 3. Now, this basically counts as a Sanctuary in Disguise, so that's one of the cool things about this. One thing I do like about this card is as long as it's on the field, your opponent cannot target set spells or traps. So that's really nice. And of course, you still got to worry about cards like Lightning Storm, but that's more of a side card right now, so I'm not too worried. 3 Ties of the Brethren. That's just to help you get access to all your fairy monsters, so yeah. The only thing is that you can't enter your battle phase, but considering that this is a going first deck anyway, it almost doesn't matter. 3 Pot of Extravagance. I'm so happy I managed to get all 3 of these like rather quickly. I pulled 2 of them and had a trade for the 3rd, so yeah. Shoutouts to the person who helped me get this. Next, 3 Pot of Duality, you know, just to get access to all your cards, and yeah, not much else to go over there. And already moving on to the traps, I am running 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. This negates anything summoned, spells, or traps. You just gotta pay half your life points, but again, with Guiding Arion, you don't even have to do that at all, so it really doesn't matter. Triple Strike, really good this format. I was going to run 3 warnings, but I decided to go for 2 just because, you know, it negates any summon as well. So, and I just don't, in case if I don't have my guiding Arion day, it just comes in handy whenever I need it. Next up, 2 copies of Rebirth of Parshath. So the way this card works is that when a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated, you have to reveal 1 counter trap from your hand, discard 1 card, and pay 1,000 life points. Again, with Guiding Arion, that part doesn't have to happen. You just still have to reveal the 1 counter trap. And then you can negate the activation of that card, and also you can special summon 1 Parshath monster from your deck or extra deck. And we do have plenty of options of that. And lastly, 2 copies of Divine Punishment. Basically, Solemn Judgment. You just need Sanctuary in the Sky to activate it, which again is not hard what to do. Well, not hard at all whatsoever. So, yeah. Alright, so that's it for the main deck. So now we're moving on to the extra deck. I'm running 2 copies of Celestial Night Lord Parshath. I was looking for a third, but I thought I had it. But I only have 2 for right now, so eventually I'll add in the third. It just requires 2+ fairy monsters. Very easy to do. You can discard 1 card, add 1 Sanctuary in the Sky, or 1 card that specifically lists Sanctuary in the Sky. So this searches out anything that has that card's name in its text. And then if Sanctuary in the Sky is already on the field, you can add 1 fairy monster instead, so that's also pretty good. If another face-up fairy monster you control is sent to the graveyard, you can banish 1 fairy monster from your grave, special summon 1 fairy from your hand, whose level is higher than the banished monster, so that's pretty good. Next up, 3 copies of Herald of the Mirage Lights. So this is basically Herald of the Arc Light. The only difference now is that when a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated, you can send a fairy monster from your hand to the grave and negate the activation. So it's a good way to get the resources you need to the grave. And of course, if this card in your position is sent to the graveyard by an opponent's card, doesn't matter how, you can add up to 2 ritual monsters or ritual spells with different names to your hand. But of course, we don't ever use that part. You just mainly use it to negate the activation of other cards, really. For the 1 Hippo Shinigami, Security Dragon, Barricade Board Blocker, you know, Borlo Dragon. These are just cards like in case if I need to banish some stuff from the graveyard. Most of the time, your counter traps are going to be more than enough anyway. 2 Starving Venom, you know, again, Pot of Extravagance, Waking the Dragon Targets, Neteria Exterio, Last Warrior from Another Planet, Ultimate Falcon. And I am running the Synchro Avenging Knight Parshath. So easy to bring out the Rebirth of Parshath counter trap. So yeah. All right, now moving on to the side deck. My side deck's fairly self-explanatory. I'm running 3 copies of Inspector Border. This actually works surprisingly well for this deck, and honestly, I'm not disappointed. I was originally going to run Cyborg the Mega Monarch, but I didn't like the results at all. It just wasn't working out the way I wanted it to, so I figured Inspector Border was a good enough second. 3 Book of Moon. Now you're probably wondering, what's the point of Book of Moon? Well, Book of Moon actually has some nice synergy with Pot of Extravagance, especially if you're forced to go second. Because, so Pot of Extravagance, which I forgot to mention, it has to be the first card you activate during your main phase. And with Book of Moon, which you can actually activate during your standby phase, like let's say you're against one of those synchro decks and they're most likely going to have Borload Savage Dragon. You could basically bait out that negate and just simply go into your Pot of Extravagance at the start of your main phase 1. Now keep in mind, Book of Moon is not a once per turn, so you could potentially activate multiples in the same standby phase. So like you could bait out the Borload Savage Dragon negate, or even the Herald of the Arc Light negate. So like, yeah, Book of Moon actually is pretty good this format. You just gotta like know how to use it. 3 Super Poly, you know, because you also have the Starving Venoms. 3 Waking the Dragons. This is mainly to deal, well, basically to counter the Lightning Storms. And just for funsies, Grand Horn of Heaven. Cool. There is some funny interaction with this right now because, like, especially with decks that use inherent summons a lot, you can negate the summon. Your opponent, yeah, gets to draw 1 card, but he immediately loses the phase he's currently in. So he goes from his main phase to his battle phase, and if he goes into main phase 2, tries to inherent summon again, activate this, he draws another card and immediately ends his turn. So yeah, Grand Horn of Heaven is also pretty good. So yeah, that's all I got. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and I will catch you guys again next time.